With Sukuna now reincarnating in his original form, I think this now confirms that everybody that was a part of the main cast squad has now died, or is basically dead. We don't know exactly where Nobara is, whether she is or isn't dead yet. We also don't know for sure if Megami is dead, but it's probably safe to assume he is. And we know for a fact that Gojo has died. The only person left is Yuji Itadori, and even though it is a tall thing to ask, I do think that Yuji will save Jujutsu Kaisen. And I would never say this without having reasons for this. I think there are multiple hints and bits of information throughout the series that lead me to believe that Yuji Itadori will be the final piece when it comes to taking down Sukuna and Kenjaku and helping the good guys win. So in today's video, I will be going over exactly how I think Yuji will be able to do this, whether or not Megami being dead is actually a good or bad ending for him, because I have seen a lot of people think that Megami dying in this recent chapter was bad, but I don't think so, and I'll quickly explain why later. And I'll also cover why I think even though Yuta, Maki, and Hikari are 3 whales when it comes to strength in Jujutsu Kaisen, I don't think that they're going to be the ones to save this story. So that being said, let's get into the video. So first, let me quickly go over why I think Megami will never return to the story and he has actually passed away here. The first reason is that Megami's body is completely gone. Even if he was to somehow return, he would have no body to return to. You see, what Sukuna did was fully reincarnate using Megami's body as sort of the step stool. We know the way in which the Culling Game sorcerers reincarnated was similar to what Sukuna has done here. They were cursed objects put into a normal person's body, and then they used that person's body to reincarnate into their old forms. With this way, for example, Kashimo, the body that he used is no longer with us. Now we just see Kashimo for what he is. This is the same with Ryu and Uro. Their forms have taken the forms that they used to be in. This is now what has happened to Megami. Megami's flesh, his body, is now gone. Megami, even if he was to return, would have no body to live in. The other reason that I think Megami is dead is that we still don't even know if Megami is still inside Sukuna's new body. It is possible, since his soul was there before, that it would still remain, but for the reason that I just said earlier, I don't think that that's the case, and I think that Megami will never return to the story. Now, as for Nobara, I honestly don't think she will return either. One of the things that would convince you, if you aren't already convinced that she won't return, is we see in a chapter cover, we see all of the victims of Mahito. We see Nanami, Junpei, and Nobara. If you've noticed, Nanami and Junpei are 2 people that Mahito has killed, which, if we follow the trend, that means that Nobara has also been killed by Mahito. Now, it is possible that she is in some sort of stable condition and will return in the future, but I honestly don't think that this is the case. I think that Nobara is probably dead, and even if she is still alive, I definitely don't see her coming back and joining the final fight anytime soon. And the reason that I think it is better off that Megami and Nobara are dead is because, combined with Gojo's death, these 3 deaths will be the catalyst for Yuji's insane power-up that we are likely to see. So now I will get into what I think is Yuji's best plan of action. We see when Yuji and Kusakabe in chapter 222 are training, Yuji slams Kusakabe over his shoulder and says, "It's about time for you to get a handle on this, Itadori." And Kusakabe replies, "Yes, sir." Now, this scene is clearly implying that Yuji and Kusakabe are in each other's bodies, because Yuji is calling Kusakabe Itadori, and Kusakabe responds to Yuji saying, "Yes, sir." Kusakabe would not be saying yes sir to Yuji as if Yuji was his superior, and Yuji would also not be calling Kusakabe Yuji. So in this scene, it is heavily implied that Yuji and Kusakabe are in each other's bodies. Now what this means is that Yuji is the person who swapped bodies with Kusakabe, as Kusakabe has also said, "You need to get a handle on this." We also know that back in chapter 220, Yuji was given a book from Choso, and this was a book about Yuki Tsukumo's research on the soul. Now in the panel before this, we see that Yuji says Shoko told him that the current him is like a cursed item that was soaked in Sukuna's cursed energy, and Yuji says that as long as he can kill Sukuna, he will eat anything. And very coincidentally, right after this, he talks to the main cast and says, "I have a few suggestions about how we can save Fushiguro." Right after he says this is when Choso gives him the book about soul research. Now, very coincidentally, right after Choso gives Yuji this book, he says, "Thank you," and Choso says it's okay, but Yuji says, "No, that's not it, about our siblings," and Choso says it's fine as long as they can go on living as a part of you. Now, what Choso says here can sort of be taken as a double meaning. The first is that they are just talking about Eso and Kechizu and how they're just grieving over their death one more time. Or they could be talking about the other death wound paintings and that Yuji has consumed them and they are now living as a part of Yuji. This would also tie back to the statement previously where Yuji says that he would eat anything if it meant killing Sukuna, combined with the book about soul research. Now, this means to me that Yuji has probably consumed the other brothers, because we know that although Eso, Kechizu, and Choso were the three main brothers that we saw, we know that there are 9 death wound paintings as a whole, which means that it is possible Yuji consumed 6 death wound paintings and got their abilities for himself. Now, this might seem like a bit of a stretch, but combined with the fact that we see Yuji has some soul manipulation later on, it makes it a bit more believable. But one thing that we do know for certain is that Yuji does have some form of soul manipulation. So I want to highlight the words that Yuji said in chapter 220 for just a moment. This is where Yuji says that he has an idea about how they can save Megami. Now I'm going to tell you the plan that I am almost 100% certain that Yuji had in mind here, and although we'll never get to see the plan, this is the plan I think Yuji was going to do. I think Yuji was going to use his soul manipulation to sort of yank Sukuna out of Megami's body, but that is why the main cast responds with the answer of saying they need to render Sukuna hindered and helpless, because if they can't, then they won't have a chance for Yuji to be able to do this. Now, sadly, Sukuna is back in his main body, so there's not even a chance for that to happen. I think that this was Yuji's main goal. They were going to have Gojo back Sukuna down into a corner, and then once he was super weak, Yuji would come in, swap souls with Sukuna and take him out of Megami's body, and then they would proceed from there. Now, even though it is sad that Megami has most likely passed, it does make things a lot easier for Yuji, because he won't have to worry about Megami when aiming for Sukuna. We know that previously, if he sort of used this body swap with Sukuna, this would just make Yuji and Megami now be in Megami's body, and that would be a bit confusing on where to go from there. But now that it is just Sukuna and Yuji, this is what I think Yuji is going to do. I think Yuji is going to find an opening to swap souls with Sukuna, so Sukuna will just end up back in Yuji's body, and then the main cast will just end up killing Sukuna while he is inside Yuji's body. Now, yes, this means that Yuji will be dead, basically, like he won't have a body to go back to, but I don't think that Yuji will care about this. I think that Yuji will let them kill Sukuna in his body, and then Yuji will just die himself, because we've seen multiple times throughout the story where Yuji just calls himself a cog in the wheel of Jujutsu. Yuji has even said himself that he doesn't care if he dies if it means killing Sukuna. I think Yuji will sacrifice himself in order to swap bodies or swap souls with Sukuna in order for not only the main cast but for the entire Jujutsu society to live. But here's the thing with this plan. We don't even know exactly how Yuji's body swapping works. It is possible that throughout the entirety of him learning about this technique up until now, he has learned a way to just manipulate souls directly without having to swap with them, meaning Yuji could just sort of yank Sukuna's soul out of his own body. Now, the thing is, Yuji won't be able to get this plan off without the help of Yuta, Maki, and Hikari. And currently, Hikari is fighting Arame, Kashimo is fighting Sukuna, and Yuta and Maki are still sitting back. Now, we do know one thing. Yuta is stated to have been the insurance when it comes to Gojo losing to Sukuna. This insurance seems to be the Jujutsu High's final plan or last-ditch effort in case Gojo was to die. Now that Gojo has died, this insurance plan will probably go into effect as soon as Kashimo is done fighting Sukuna. So let me tell you what I think this insurance could be. I think it could only be 2 things, so I'll go over the first one since I'll just go over this one quicker. The first one is just more of a theory, if anything, and that is that Gojo has given the last Sukuna finger to Yuta, and that Yuta will feed this finger to Rika. Now, how effective this would even be is beyond me. I have no idea even if Rika would be able to control Sukuna's power, use it to sort of make her even stronger than she even is, and if combined with this, Yuta thinks that he would have a chance against Sukuna. This might be why Maki calls Yuta their insurance, because it is a gamble that they're taking on Yuta, that with this Rika and Sukuna power, he would be able to fight Sukuna. Now, this whole idea of Yuta being insurance could also just be Yuta's strength on his own, and them banking on the fact that Kashimo can get Sukuna weak enough to where Yuta can fight him and beat him, or just get him into a weak enough state to where Yuji can pull off his curse technique. The reason this gamble of hoping that Kashimo gets Sukuna weak enough for Yuta to fight him isn't a bad gamble is because, per Yuji's words, Yuta is able to beat 15 Finger Sukuna, and I just want to reiterate again, this is per Yuji's words. We see that Yuji actually thinks that Yuta is capable of beating and killing a 15 Finger Sukuna. Now, this just means that they're hoping that Kashimo can get Sukuna weak enough to where he loses about 5 fingers in strength, because right now, obviously Sukuna is 20 fingers level in strength as he is just reincarnated into his old form, and if Yuta is able to kill a 15 Finger Sukuna, the main cast will sort of be banking on the fact that Kashimo can knock Sukuna down a couple fingers in strength in their fight. I think the chances of beating Sukuna go significantly up if Hikari can manage to beat Arame. Because we know that Yuta and Hikari are around the same level in strength, Yuta even said himself that he thought Hikari was stronger than he is when Hikari is on a roll, and we also saw that Gojo had this sort of contingency plan that if Gojo at any point in his fight against Sukuna got weaker than Yuta or Hikari, that they would step in. Gojo making this a plan that if any point he got weaker than Yuta or Hikari, this implies that Yuta and Hikari are around the same level, sort of using them as a benchmark for when they should step in to fight. And when it comes to Yuji, I think that if Yuta, Maki, or Hikari ends up dying, Yuji will get an insane boost in strength, because we learned from Todo in Goodwill that whenever a small opponent or an inferior opponent gets angry, they get a lot of curse energy and they can end up beating the person who is picking on them. Because when you get angry, you get a lot of curse energy, and if you wield it correctly, you will be able to take down a superior opponent. Yuji has already shown us glimpses throughout Shibuya of when he's gotten angry, how much stronger he was able to get, but I think the most important example is one that happened rather recently when Yuji was fighting against Sukuna. We saw immediately after Sukuna went into Megami's body, as Yuji was fighting Sukuna, he flung a piece of the road towards him, and even Sukuna said, what is this strength? Sukuna in this moment is surprised because of how much strength Yuji is outputting. He knows how strong Yuji is, he was in Yuji's body the entire series up until this moment, and even accounting for the fact that Yuji should get somewhat stronger when angry, Sukuna could not comprehend how exactly Yuji had gotten so much stronger in such a short amount of time. But we know the answer is because Yuji was angry. How do I say this? Even though we associate the word luck with Hikari, I think that in second place we should put Yuji right behind him. You can call it luck or skill or just outright Yuji being exceptional, but it seems like in any case where Yuji needs to hit a black flash, he just ends up doing it. We saw against Hanami his first time experiencing Jujutsu, his first time experiencing the waves of curse energy, the ups and downs of how to manipulate it. He was able to land 5 black flashes. We also saw in his fight against Mahito, Yuji at the end of the fight when he had almost nothing left in the tank, and when he and Mahito only had 1 punch left to hit each other with, Yuji was able to land a black flash. Gege even said in the chapter extra that if Yuji had not landed that black flash, Mahito would have torn him to shreds. This is either extreme luck, skill, or being exceptional, but whatever it is, if Yuji had not landed that black flash, there would be no Yuji Itadori today. With this new technique that Yuji has, even outside of it, a massive jump in power would make complete sense for a character like Yuji. We see that in shonen history, massive jumps in powers for main characters tend to be frowned upon because they either don't make sense or they just happen all too quickly. But in Yuji's case, with the way the curse energy works, combined with anger, training, and conviction, Yuji getting a massive jump in power would just actually make sense, because we see that he has been lucky before in landing black flashes. We also see that he is able to grow quickly throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, and combined with the fact that we also know he has this new technique, Yuji being able to take down Sukuna while he is a bit weaker than he is now would completely make sense. So I will say this, if Yuta, Hikari, and Maki can all get Sukuna to a off-guard stance or even just weaker than usual, and they can get an opening for Yuji to come in and use his soul manipulation technique, I think the Yuji will be the one to end up saving Jujutsu Kaisen. I think even if they can't get Sukuna to a super weakened state, if Yuji gets a massive power up on his own, or just is able to catch Sukuna off guard, Yuji will be able to manipulate Sukuna's soul to either swap with him or take Sukuna's soul out of his own body. But the only way to know for sure is to wait and see. I do hope that Yuji is the one to end up saving Jujutsu Kaisen, because it does seem like Yuji is the final piece because of how he's persevered through this entire series, watching his friends and sensei die. He has been able to keep going strong, and we even saw through Shibuya that was the hardest test Yuji's ever been through, and even through Shibuya, Yuji came out on top. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video, and if you enjoyed, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.